The hospital ship Mercy's Light moved slowly through the dark space between two star systems. It was a big ship, painted white from front to back, with a bright red cross on both sides that could be seen from thousands of kilometers away. Every species in the galaxy knew what that symbol meant. It meant this ship carried no guns, it carried no missiles. It carried only doctors, nurses, medicine, and hope. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge and watched the stars through the wide front window. She was a small woman with short black hair and tired eyes, but there was something about her that made people listen when she spoke. She had been a combat officer once, years ago, but she had asked for a transfer to the medical fleet. She told people she was tired of breaking things. She wanted to fix them instead. The ship was full. Every bed in every medical bay was taken. Alien refugees from 3 different species filled the hallways, sitting on the floor, leaning against walls, holding their children close. A border war between the Velthari Dominion and 2 smaller species had destroyed entire colonies, and the Galactic Accord had done nothing. They held meetings, they gave speeches, they expressed concern, but they sent no help. So Earth sent Mercy's Light. Down on the medical deck, Dr. Jisoo was in the middle of her 14th surgery that day. Her hands were steady even though she had not slept in 31 hours. The patient on the table was an alien child, barely old enough to walk, with burns covering half of its small body. Jisoo did not know the child's name, but she worked on it with the same care she would give to any human child, because that was the whole point of being out here. A nurse named Mirai handed her a tool and said quietly, "Doctor, you need to rest at some point." Jisoo shook her head without looking up. After this one. She always said that. After this one. And then there was always another one. On the bridge, the communication officer looked up from his screen with a confused look on his face. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple hyperspace signatures. 12 contacts, coming in fast." Yuna turned from the window. "Identification? Working on it." A pause, then his face went pale. "Velthari Dominion. 12 warships. They'll be here in 90 seconds. Yuna felt her stomach drop, but she kept her voice calm. "Open a channel. All frequencies." Channel open. "Velthari vessels, this is Captain Yuna of the United Earth Navy hospital ship Mercy's Light. We are a medical vessel operating under galactic humanitarian law. We carry no weapons. We are treating wounded civilians, including citizens, of your own vassal worlds. Please identify your intentions." There was no reply. The 12 Velthari ships dropped out of hyperspace in a wide formation, like predators surrounding wounded prey. They were ugly ships, covered in dark armor and heavy weapons. Each one was built for one purpose only, and that purpose was destruction. Yuna tried again. "Velthari vessels, I repeat, this is a hospital ship. We are protected under—" The first shot hit the forward shield and the whole ship shook. Alarms screamed to life. Red lights filled every corridor. On the medical deck, Jisoo grabbed the edge of the surgery table to keep from falling. The alien child began to cry. "Shields at 60%, the defense officer shouted. "Captain, they're firing with everything they have." Yuna gripped the arm of her chair. "Send a distress signal. Every frequency. Every relay. I want Earth to hear this. I want the whole galaxy to hear this." The second volley was worse. 3 shots punched through the weakening shields and hit the hull directly. The lower decks cracked open like eggshells. Air rushed out into space. Bulkhead doors slammed shut, but not fast enough. 73 people died in the first 10 seconds of the breach. Patients in their beds, nurses running to help, refugees who had come to this ship because they thought it was safe. A third volley followed almost immediately. The engine section exploded. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, filling the ship with a weak red glow. Yuna pulled herself up from the floor. Blood was running down the side of her face from a cut above her eye. The bridge was full of smoke and sparks. Half her crew was down. "Life pods," she said. "Launch all life pods. Get everyone off this ship." "Captain, the pod launch system is damaged on decks 4 through 9. Then use the ones that work. Move." She turned to the communication panel and opened the channel one last time. Her voice was not shaking. It was not begging. It was something else entirely. "This is Captain Yuna of the UNES Mercy's Light. You are firing on a medical vessel. You are killing the wounded, the sick, and the people who care for them. I want you to know that this moment is being recorded. Every second of it. And I want you to know something else." She paused and looked straight at the camera. "Earth will remember this." The next shot tore through the bridge. The ceiling collapsed. Yuna was thrown across the room like a rag doll. Everything went dark. She woke up to Jisu's face above her. They were in a life pod, a tiny metal box, drifting through the wreckage of what had been the largest hospital ship ever built by humanity. Through the small round window, Yuna could see pieces of the Mercy's light spinning in the darkness, still burning, still glowing. "How many?" Yuna whispered. Jisu's eyes were red. Her surgical gown was covered in blood, not her own. "We don't know yet. A lot." Yuna closed her eyes. Outside the pod, the Valthari ships were already turning away. They did not bother to check for survivors. They did not care. On the bridge of the lead Valthari warship, Overlord Dreth watched the wreckage with a smile on his face. He was a tall creature, broad and armored, with eyes like black stones. He turned to his second-in-command and said, "Send a message to the Galactic Accord. Tell them this is what happens when soft creatures waste their resources on the dying. Compassion is a disease. We just provided the cure." His officers laughed. Dreth looked back at the burning remains of the hospital ship and felt nothing. It was a lesson. But the distress signal had already left the system. It was racing through space at the speed of light, bouncing from relay to relay, carrying the sensor logs, the visual recordings, and the final words of Captain Yuna. It reached Earth 7 hours later. And when it did, something changed. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like the sound of 4 billion people taking a breath at the same time and holding it. The silence did not last long. What came after the silence was something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Taeho was eating dinner alone in his apartment in Busan when the call came. He was a man of 54 years, with gray at his temples and deep lines on his face from decades of service. He had fought in 2 border conflicts, commanded a carrier group for 6 years, and been promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander 3 years ago, during peacetime. He was known as a quiet man, a patient man, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke and never raised his voice. He answered the call, and a young officer on the other end told him what had happened. Taeho said nothing. He set down his chopsticks. He pushed his plate to the side. He sat in silence for exactly 40 seconds, while the officer waited on the line, not daring to speak. Then Taeho said, "Send me the footage." He watched it once, then he watched it again. He saw the hospital ship with its red crosses glowing bright. He saw the Valthari ships arrive. He saw the first shots hit the shields. He saw the hull break open and the bodies float into space. He saw nurses running down hallways that no longer had floors. He saw Captain Yuna's final message. He heard her voice, calm and clear, saying, "Earth will remember this." Taeho closed the video. He stood up. He put on his uniform. And he drove to Naval Command. When he walked into the war room, it was already chaos. Officers were shouting at each other. Screens on every wall showed the footage playing on loop. Some people were crying. Some were hitting tables. Some were just staring at nothing. Taeho walked to the front of the room and stood there. He did not shout. He did not wave his arms. He just stood there and waited. One by one, The room went quiet. "Recall every ship," he said. His voice was low and even. "Every patrol, every escort, every deep space survey vessel, every ship we have, from every corner of explored space. Bring them all home." A senior officer named Sun Wu, a tall man with a calm face and careful eyes, stepped forward. "Admiral, that will leave our colony routes unprotected." "I know. The Galactic Accord will question." "I don't care what the Accord questions. Recall the fleet." Sun Wu nodded once and began giving orders. The footage spread across Earth in less than an hour. It played on every news channel, every social feed, every public screen. People stopped what they were doing and watched. In restaurants and offices, in schools and hospitals, in homes on every continent, people watched a hospital ship burn, and something inside them broke. But the thing that broke was not their spirit, it was their patience. The United Earth Parliament called an emergency session the next morning. The Great Chamber in Geneva was packed. Every seat was taken. Diplomats and politicians shouted over each other. Some said war was too costly. Some said they should go through the Galactic Accord's legal system. The debate went in circles for 3 hours. Then the doors opened, and Dr. Jisoo appeared on a large screen at the front of the chamber. She was calling from the rescue ship that had picked up her life pod. Her left arm was in a cast. Bandages covered half her face. She could barely stand, so she was sitting in a wheelchair. The chamber went silent. Jisoo did not give a speech. She did not shout or cry or beg. She simply reached into the pocket of her hospital gown and pulled out a small plastic card. It was a staff identification badge, the kind that every crew member on Mercy's Light had worn around their neck. This one was stained dark red with dried blood. "This belonged to a nurse named Bora," Jisoo said quietly. She was 26 years old. When the hull broke open on Deck 7, she threw herself over 2 patients to shield them from the debris. The patients survived. Bora did not. She held the badge up so the camera could see it clearly. There are 412 names on the casualty list. Humans, aliens, patients, healers, children. I am not here to tell you what to do. I am here to show you this badge and ask you one question. What are you going to do about it? The vote was held 30 minutes later. It was unanimous. Within a week, every shipyard in the solar system was working at full capacity. Ships that had been in repair docks were rushed to completion. Ships that had been scheduled for retirement were pulled back into service and given new weapons. Reserve crews were called up. Training was cut short. Nobody complained. Nobody asked for more time. Everyone moved with the same quiet, focused energy, like a heartbeat that had become steady and strong after a moment of shock. The fleet was given a name, Task Force Remembrance. The flagship was the dreadnought Wrath of Sol, the largest warship Earth had ever built. It was 3 kilometers long, covered in heavy armor, and carrying enough firepower to crack a small moon in half. Admiral Taeho moved his command to its bridge. Lieutenant Hana arrived on the Wrath of Sol on the 4th day. She was young, sharp-faced, and carried herself like someone who had not slept in a week, but refused to show it. She had been assigned as the ship's tactical officer, and she was very, very good at her job. She was also the sister of a medic who had served on Mercy's Light. His name was Junho. He had been on Deck 7 when the hull broke open. He did not make it to a life pod. Hana did not talk about Junho. She did not cry in front of anyone. She sat at her station, studied Valthari ship designs, memorized their weapon ranges and shield frequencies, and planned how to take them apart, piece by piece. Commander Sunwoo noticed. He did not say anything about it. He just started leaving cups of coffee at her station when she was not looking. On the 8th day, Ensign Mirei, who had survived the attack on Mercy's Light and transferred to the flagship's intelligence section, made a discovery. She had been monitoring Valthari communication channels, and she decoded an internal message sent between Dominion fleet commanders. The message was simple. It said, "The humans will make noise for a few weeks and then do nothing. They are a species of doctors and farmers. They do not have the stomach for real war." Another message, sent from Overlord Dreth himself, was even shorter. "Forget the humans, they are insects." Mireille brought the decoded messages to Admiral Tejo's ready room. Then he handed the datapad to Sunwoo. "Share this with every ship in the fleet," Tejo said. Sunwoo looked at him. "Sir, this might—" "I know exactly what it will do." It did exactly what Tejo wanted. When the crews of 412 warships read that the enemy thought they were insects, that the enemy was laughing at their dead, something changed in the fleet. It was not anger. Anger burns hot and fades. This was something colder. Something that did not fade. On the 14th day, Task Force Remembrance was assembled at the edge of the solar system. 412 warships, one for every name on the casualty list, formed up in perfect formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, frigates, and at the center, the massive shape of the Wrath of Sol. Admiral Tejo stood on the bridge and opened a channel to the entire fleet. Every ship, every crew member, every single human being who was about to fly into the unknown. 14 days ago, he said, they fired on a hospital ship. They killed our people. They killed people we were trying to protect, and they laughed about it. He paused. They think mercy is weakness. They think that because we choose to heal instead of destroy, we cannot destroy. They are wrong. We are going to show them exactly how wrong they are. Not because we enjoy war, not because we want revenge, but because if we do nothing, the next hospital ship will burn too, and the one after that, and the one after that. His voice dropped low. We go now, and we go together, for every name on that list. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, and the stars turned to streaks of light. The largest military force Earth had ever assembled disappeared from the solar system in the space of a single heartbeat. The journey through hyperspace took 6 days. 6 days of nothing but the blue glow of faster-than-light travel outside the windows and the low hum of engines running at full power. 6 days for 412 warships to cross the vast emptiness between human space and the borders of the Velthari Dominion. 6 days for the galaxy to lose its mind. The Galactic Accord reacted first, and they reacted the way they always did, with words. The Accord was a council of 47 alien species that had been created centuries ago to keep the peace. In practice, it mostly kept itself busy. It held sessions, it passed resolutions, it expressed deep concern about things, and then did nothing about them. Within hours of Earth's fleet departure, the Accord sent an urgent diplomatic message to the Wrath of Sol, demanding that Earth stand down and allow the Accord to handle the situation through proper legal channels. Commander Sunwoo received the message on the bridge and read it carefully. Then he composed a reply. The United Earth Navy thanks the Galactic Accord for its message. Earth has noted the Accord's concern regarding our military response. Earth has also noted the Accord's silence when our hospital ship was attacked and 412 of our people were killed. We will handle this matter ourselves. Please do not get in the way. He showed the message to Admiral Tejo before sending it. Tejo read it, nodded once, and said, "Send it." The Accord sent 3 more messages over the next 2 days. Each one was more urgent than the last. Each one received no reply. Something interesting began to happen among the other species in the galaxy. Several of them, quietly and without announcement, began pulling their ships away from the area between Earth's fleet and Velthari space. They did not say they were afraid. They said they were repositioning for safety. But everyone knew the truth. They looked at the size of the human fleet, and they looked at what the Velthari had done, and they decided they did not want to be standing in the middle when those two forces met. 3 species went further. They sent private messages to Earth, not through official channels, but through back doors and personal contacts. The messages all said roughly the same thing. We are sorry about your hospital ship. We hope you make them pay. Inside the fleet, the 6 days of travel were not quiet. Every ship was preparing. Every crew was training. And in the spaces between drills and briefings, people were dealing with what was coming in their own ways. On the Wrath of Sol, Sergeant Dowan ran his marine company through combat drills 16 hours a day. Dowan was a thick-necked man with a shaved head and hands like shovels. He had been a Marine for 20 years and had seen combat 3 times. He was not a man who made speeches or said clever things. He led by example. He was always the first one through the door and the last one to eat. His company was going to be responsible for boarding operations, taking enemy ships and stations by force. It was the most dangerous job in the fleet, and every one of his Marines had volunteered for it. During a break between drills, a young Marine named Kyung-soo sat down next to Dawan and asked, "Sergeant, what's it going to be like?" Dawan looked at him. "You've done the training." "I know, but what's it really going to be like?" Dawan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's going to be loud. It's going to be fast. Some of us are going to get hurt. But you remember why we're going. We're not going for land. We're not going for money. We're going for the people who can't go themselves anymore. You keep that in your head, and your hands will know what to do." Kyung-soo nodded and went back to cleaning his weapon. Do-han watched him go and hoped the kid would make it through. In the medical section of a support ship trailing behind the fleet, Dr. Jisoo was recording testimony. She sat in front of a camera with her arms still in a cast and spoke clearly and calmly about everything she had seen. The attack, the explosions, the patients who died in their beds, the nurses who died trying to save them, the child she had been operating on when the first shot hit. "The child survived," Jisoo said to the camera. "I finished the surgery in the life pod with a flashlight and a basic medical kit. She is recovering on the refugee transport now." She paused. "Her name is hard for me to say in her language, but it sounds a little like the word for morning. I think that's a good name for someone who survived the darkest night." Her hands shook when she talked about Bora, the nurse who had died on Deck 7. But her voice did not shake. Not once. Lieutenant Hana barely left her station during the entire journey. She had pulled every piece of intelligence Earth had ever gathered on the Velthari military, and was studying it, the way a hunter studies the ground before a chase. She knew their ship types, their weapon ranges, their shield strengths, their formation patterns, and their communication protocols. She knew how their captains thought, and how their officers reacted under pressure. She slept 2 hours a night, sometimes 3. She ate at her station. She spoke to no one, unless it was about the mission. Commander Sunwoo watched her from across the bridge with quiet concern. He knew about her brother, but no one said anything about it, because everyone understood. One evening, Sunwoo walked past her station and set down a cup of coffee without a word. Hana glanced at it, then at him. He was already walking away. She drank the coffee and kept working. On the 5th day, Ensign Mireille intercepted something that changed the mood of the entire fleet. She had been monitoring Velthari communications non-stop, running every signal through decryption systems, and she found an internal message from several Velthari vassal species, smaller civilizations that the Dominion had conquered and forced into service over the centuries. The messages were full of fear. Not fear of Earth, fear of the Velthari. The vassal species had been ordered to send their own ships to defend Velthari space, and they were terrified. They had no desire to fight humans. They had no reason to fight humans. Some of them had even been treated on Mercy's Light before it was destroyed. Mirai brought the decoded messages to Teiho's ready room. He read them slowly, then set the datapad down on his desk. "These people are slaves," Mirai said. "They didn't choose this." "I know," Teiho said. "What are we going to do about them?" Teiho looked at her. "We are going to give them a choice. A real one. Maybe the first one they've had in a very long time." He filed the intelligence away and told Mirai to keep monitoring. She nodded and left. On the 6th day, the fleet received one final communication before they reached Velthari space. It came from the Velthari themselves. Overlord Dreth had finally learned that the human fleet was real, that it was big, and that it was coming straight for him. His scout ships had counted the vessels and reported back. The number was far larger than anything Dreth had expected. His military advisors told him to prepare for a major engagement. For the first time, Dreth stopped smiling. He ordered his fleet to form a defensive line around his fortress world of Keldran, and activated every orbital weapon platform he had. But he also sent a broadcast to the approaching fleet. It said, "Turn back, humans. You are entering the territory of the Velthari Dominion. Any act of aggression will be met with total annihilation." Teiho did not reply. Not yet. On the 7th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Velthari territory. 412 warships appeared in the darkness like a wall of steel and light. Running lights blazed, weapons powered up, shields activated. The formation was perfect. Carriers in the center, destroyers on the wings, the Wrath of Sol at the front, like the tip of a spear. Admiral Teiho stood on the bridge, looked out at the stars of enemy space, and opened a channel, not just to the Velthari. To everyone. Every frequency. Every relay. Every species in the galaxy with a receiver. This is Admiral Teiho of the United Earth Navy. 14 days ago, Velthari warships attacked and destroyed the hospital ship Mercy's Light. They killed 412 people, healers, patients, and refugees. They fired on a vessel that carried no weapons and wore the mark of mercy on its hull. He took a breath. You fired on a hospital ship. You killed the wounded, the healers, and the helpless. We are here now. Another breath, slower this time. And we are not helpless. Across the galaxy, on stations and ships and worlds belonging to dozens of species, people heard those words and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. The humans were not coming with words. They were not coming with resolutions. They were coming with fire. The Velthari had mined the border corridor. Thousands of explosive devices floated in the darkness between the stars, each one powerful enough to crack a destroyer in half. Behind the mines, 50 Velthari warships sat in a tight formation, their weapons hot and their shields at full power. It was a wall designed to slow down any attacker long enough for the main fleet at Keldron to prepare. Lieutenant Hana looked at the tactical display on her screen and almost smiled. Almost. They're using a standard Velthari blocking pattern, she said. Heavy ships in the center, lighter ships on the flanks, mines covering the approach lanes. Textbook. Admiral Teiho looked at her from his command chair. Can you break it? I already have a plan, sir. She laid it out in less than 2 minutes. Missile frigates would go first, launching long-range weapons to clear paths through the minefield. Then the heavy cruisers would push forward on the flanks, drawing the Velthari ships outward to respond. And while the enemy was stretched thin, the assault carriers would punch straight through the center like a fist through paper. Teiho nodded. Do it. The battle started at exactly 0600 fleet time. The missile frigates opened fire first, sending hundreds of guided missiles into the minefield. The explosions were silent in the vacuum of space, but bright enough to light up the cockpits of every ship in the fleet. Whole sections of the minefield disappeared in chains of fire as mines triggered each other. The Velthari responded immediately. Their ships surged forward, trying to catch the frigates before they could finish clearing the lanes. but the heavy cruisers were waiting. 12 Earth cruisers hit the Velthari flanks with concentrated beam fire, punching through shields and tearing into armor. The Velthari ships turned to face this new threat, and in doing so, they opened the center. The assault carriers came through the gap at full speed. Fighters launched from their bays like swarms of angry insects. Boarding craft followed close behind. The Velthari center collapsed in minutes, as Earth ships poured through the breach and hit them from every direction. The whole engagement lasted 37 minutes. When it was over, all 50 Velthari ships were either destroyed or drifting without power. Earth lost 9 ships, 9 too many, but far fewer than the enemy had expected. Commander Sunwoo reported the losses to Taeho. The admiral closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and said, "Record their names, every crew member. We will honor them when this is done." The fleet moved deeper into Velthari space. What happened next surprised everyone, including the Velthari. The first vassal world they reached was a planet called Teska, home to a small species that the Dominion had conquered 40 years ago. Velthari warships orbited the planet, and Velthari soldiers occupied its cities. The vassal government had been ordered to send its own ships to join the defense of Keldron. Taeho did not fire on Teska. Instead, he broadcast the intercepted messages that Ensign Mirai had decoded, the ones showing that the vassal species had been forced into service against their will. He played them on every channel, so that both the people of Teska and the Velthari occupiers could hear them. Then he sent a simple message. "People of Teska, we know you did not choose this war. We know you were forced to serve the Dominion. We are giving you a choice now. Stand down your ships, and we will pass you by in peace. No shots fired, no harm done. The choice is yours." There was a long silence. Then, one by one, the Thescan ships powered down their weapons and moved aside. The Velthari garrison ships tried to stop them, but there were only 3 Velthari vessels in orbit, and they were facing the full weight of Earth's fleet. They turned and ran. As the fleet passed Theska, a transmission came from the planet's surface. It was short, and it was in broken human language, clearly translated by a basic computer program. "Thank you. We have waited 40 years for someone to ask us what we wanted." The same thing happened at the next vassal world, and the next, and the next. Every time Taeho broadcast the evidence and offered a choice. Every time the vassal species chose peace. Some of them even sent messages of support. One species, a people called the Dorvani, who had been under Velthari control for over a century, transmitted a map of Velthari mine placements around Keldron. Mirai verified the data and passed it to Hana, who adjusted her battle plans accordingly. The Galactic Accord watched all of this, with their mouths open. They had spent centuries trying to manage the Velthari through diplomacy and negotiation, and had achieved nothing. Earth had freed 4 vassal worlds in 3 days, simply by showing up with enough firepower to matter, and enough decency to ask. Then the fleet arrived at Keldron, and the talking stopped. Keldron was the Velthari fortress world, the heart of their military power. It was a dark planet, covered in gray clouds and black rock, ringed by massive orbital defense platforms and 300 warships. The platforms were enormous, bristling with heavy weapons that could tear apart capital ships at long range. The planetary shield below was strong enough to stop a nuclear bombardment. Overlord Dreth sat in his command bunker on the surface and broadcast his challenge. "Come then, humans. You freed a few slaves and you think you are warriors? Break yourselves against our walls. This is where your little adventure ends." Admiral Taeho did not respond with words. He responded with fire. The first phase of the battle was long-range bombardment. The Earth dreadnoughts, including the Wrath of Sol, positioned themselves at extreme range, far beyond the reach of the Velthari orbital platforms, and began firing kinetic rounds. These were not energy weapons. They were solid pieces of metal, accelerated to incredible speeds. Simple, old-fashioned, devastating. The kinetic rounds hit the orbital platforms like hammers hitting glass. The Velthari had designed their defenses to resist energy weapons and missiles. They had never faced an enemy that threw rocks at them at a fraction of the speed of light. The platforms began to break apart, one after another, their heavy armor cracking and splitting under the impacts. Dreth watched from the surface as his orbital ring crumbled. He ordered his fleet to attack. 300 Velthari warships surged outward to meet the human fleet. The second phase of the battle was the most violent naval engagement the galaxy had seen in generations. Ships on both sides traded fire at close range. Shields flared and collapsed. Hulls were punctured and decks were torn open. The darkness of space filled with light and debris and silent explosions. In the middle of this chaos, Sergeant Dowan and his Marines launched from the assault carriers in armored boarding craft. Their target was the largest remaining orbital station, a command platform that controlled the planetary shield. If they could take it, they could shut down the shield and the battle was over. The boarding craft latched onto the station's hull and the Marines cut their way inside. The fighting was close and brutal. Velthari soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but they fought like individuals. The Marines fought like a machine, covering each other, moving in teams, clearing rooms with practiced precision. Dowan was first through every door. He moved like a man who had done this 1,000 times, which he nearly had. When a Velthari soldier twice his size charged at him in a corridor, Dowan sidestepped, put 3 shots into the creature's knee joint, and kept moving before it hit the floor. Young Kyung-soo was right behind him, just like they had trained. The kid was scared. Dowan could see it in his eyes. But he kept moving, kept shooting, kept doing his job. That was all Dowan had ever asked. They reached the shield's control room in 11 minutes. Dowan blew the door with a breaching charge. His team rushed in, and they secured the controls. Mireille patched in from the Wrath of Sol, talked them through shutting down the planetary shield. The shield fell. When the Velthari fleet saw their shield go down, the fight went out of them. Some ships tried to run. Some turned their weapons on Earth ships in desperate ramming attacks. But most simply stopped firing and broadcast their surrender. Lieutenant Hana coordinated the final phase from their station, her voice calm and steady as she directed ships to intercept runners and accept surrenders. By the time it was over, the Velthari fleet was gone. 214 ships destroyed, 86 surrendered, the rest had scattered into deep space. Earth had lost 31 ships. Every name would be remembered. When the fighting stopped, Sun Wu turned to Taeho and said, "Sir, we have clear firing lines on the planet's surface. We could end this now." Taeho shook his head. "There are civilians down there. Hospitals, schools, children." "Sir, we are not them, Sun Wu. That is the whole point. That has always been the whole point." He opened a channel to the surface. "Overlord Dreth, your fleet is destroyed. Your stations are in our hands. Your vassal worlds are free. You have one choice left, and I suggest you make it carefully." There was no response, only silence. Taeho sat back in his chair and waited. He was a patient man. He could wait as long as it took. 12 hours passed in silence. Admiral Taeho did not send another message. He did not threaten. He did not make demands. He simply kept his fleet in orbit around Keldron and waited. The wreckage of 300 Velthari warships drifted through space like a metal graveyard, and the people on the planet's surface watched the sky and understood that the war was over. On the 13th hour, Overlord Dreth sent a single transmission from his command bunker. It contained one word in the Velthari language. The translation was simple: "I surrender." A shuttle was sent down to the surface. Sergeant Dohan personally led the security team. They landed in the courtyard of Dreth's military compound, a massive structure of black stone and sharp angles, and they waited with their weapons ready. The doors opened, and Dreth walked out. He was taller than any of the Marines had expected. His armor was still polished, his back was straight, and his black stone eyes moved across the human soldiers with something that was not quite fear, but was no longer pride. He held out his hands and let them put restraints on his wrists without a word. Dohan looked up at the alien overlord and said nothing. There was nothing to say. He led Dreth to the shuttle, and they flew back up to the Wrath of Sol. On the ship, Dreth was taken to a plain gray room with a single table and 2 chairs. He sat in one chair and waited. He expected to be beaten. He expected to be tortured. He expected to be dragged through the corridors and displayed like a trophy. That is what the Velthari did with their prisoners, and he assumed all species were the same. Instead, the door opened and Admiral Tejo walked in. He was alone. No guards, no weapons. Just a tired man in a uniform who sat down across the table from the creature that had ordered the destruction of a hospital ship. Tejo looked at Dreth for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "Do you know why you are still alive?" Dreth said nothing. "You are alive because killing you would be easy, and easy is not the same as right." The door opened again, and Dr. Jisoo walked in. She was still healing. Her arm was out of the cast now, but moved stiffly, and the scars on her face were still red and fresh. She walked slowly to the table and placed a datapad in front of Dreth. "These are names," she said. 412 names. Every person who died on Mercy's Light. Dreth looked at the datapad, but did not touch it. "Some of them are human names," Jisoo continued. "Some of them are alien names. Some of them are names of species that you conquered. They came to our ship because they had nowhere else to go, and we took them in because that is what we do. And you killed them." She reached over and turned the datapad on. The screen lit up with a long list of names. Next to each name was a small photograph. "I want you to look at them," Jisoo said. "Every single one." Dreth's eyes moved to the screen. The first face was a young human woman, Bora, the nurse who had died on Deck 7. The next was an alien child with burns on its face. Then a doctor. Then a patient. Then a refugee, one after another. Jisoo did not rush him. She stood there and made him look. Tejo sat in his chair and said nothing. The room was very quiet. When Dreth reached the end of the list, he sat in silence for a very long time. His face did not change. Velthari were not known for showing emotion, but his hands, which had been resting flat on the table, were now curled into fists, not from anger, from something else. Something he did not have a word for in his language. He did not apologize. The Velthari did not have a word for apology either. But he looked at Jisoo and said, in rough human language that he had clearly learned only recently, "I did not think you would come." Jisoo stared at him. "That," she said, "is exactly the problem." She turned and walked out of the room. Tejo followed a moment later. Dreth was left alone with the datapad and 412 faces staring up at him from the screen. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Accord held a war crimes tribunal. It was the first real action the Accord had taken in decades, and everyone knew they were only doing it because Earth had shamed them into it. The evidence was overwhelming. Sensor logs, visual recordings, communication intercepts, and the testimony of hundreds of survivors all pointed to the same conclusion. The Velthari had deliberately attacked a clearly marked, unarmed medical vessel in neutral space. Overlord Dreth and 7 of his commanding officers were found guilty of war crimes against protected persons and vessels. They were sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony at the edge of known space. When the sentence was read, Dreth stood straight and said nothing. He was led away in restraints, and no one in the gallery felt sorry for him. Back on the captured orbital station above Keldron, the Earth forces had begun building a memorial wall. It was a simple thing, a long section of smooth white metal, mounted in the main corridor of the station, with names engraved into it in gold letters. 412 names. Sergeant Dowan visited the wall on a quiet evening when most of the station was asleep. He stood in front of it for a long time, reading the names one by one. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin, a medic's insignia, the kind worn by medical staff on Earth Navy ships. It had belonged to someone specific. Dowan pressed the pin into a small holder next to one of the names on the wall and stepped back. The name next to the pin was Juno. He stood there for another minute, then turned and walked away. Lieutenant Hana found the pin 2 days later. She had come to the memorial wall on her own, not knowing that anyone else had been there. She saw her brother's name and the small medic's pin next to it, and she stopped. She stood very still for a long time. Her face did not move. Her eyes did not blink. Then she whispered, so quietly that no one else could have heard it, even if anyone had been there. "We got them, brother." She reached out and touched the pin with her fingertips. Then she put her hand down and walked back to her station. 1 month after the battle, Admiral Tejo stood before the Galactic Accord Assembly and announced a new policy. He called it the Mercy Doctrine. He spoke plainly and simply, the way he always did. From this day forward, any attack on a medical vessel of any species, by any species, will be treated by the United Earth Navy as an attack on Earth itself. We will respond with the full force of our military. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. This is a promise. The assembly was silent. Several alien ambassadors exchanged looks. Some of them thought it was arrogant. Some of them thought it was dangerous. A few of them thought it was the bravest thing they had ever heard a species say out loud. No one objected. Ensign Mire, who had been given a commendation for her intelligence work during the campaign, spent her leave time compiling the complete record of what had happened. The attack on Mercy's Light. The assembly of the fleet. The liberation of the vassal worlds. The Battle of Keldron. The refusal to bomb civilian targets. The trial. The memorial. She transmitted the record on every frequency in the galaxy. Within a week, it had been received, copied, and shared by more species than anyone could count. It became the most widely distributed transmission in the history of the Galactic Accord. It was not propaganda. It was not a threat. It was simply the truth, told completely and without decoration. And the truth was this: humans were a species that built hospital ships and sent them into danger to help strangers. And when someone destroyed that hospital ship, the same humans built a war fleet and crossed the galaxy to make it right, and then refused to become the monsters they were fighting. 6 months after the attack, a new ship launched from Earth's orbital shipyard. It was called the UENS Mercy's Light II. It was twice the size of the original, with better shields, more medical bays, and room for 1,000 patients. It was painted white from front to back, with a bright red cross on both sides. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge. She had healed, mostly. Her body still ached in cold weather, and she had a scar above her eye that would never fully fade. But her voice was the same, her eyes were the same, and when she gave orders, people still listened. Dr. Jisoo stood beside her as Chief Medical Officer, exactly where she belonged. This time, the hospital ship did not travel alone. 6 warships flew in formation around it, a permanent escort, armed to the teeth and ready for anything. The ships were painted the same white as Mercy's Light II, but everyone in the galaxy knew what was underneath that paint. As the convoy departed Earth's orbit on its maiden voyage, Admiral Tejo watched from the observation deck of the orbital station. Commander Sunwoo stood beside him, hands behind his back. "Think anyone will ever try that again?" Sunwoo asked. Taeho watched the hospital ship and its escorts grow smaller against the stars. He thought about Yuna's final transmission. He thought about Jisoo holding up a blood-stained badge. He thought about Hana whispering to her brother's name on a wall. He thought about Dohwan placing a pin next to the name of a man he had never met, because it was the right thing to do. "No," Taeho said quietly. "But if they do, we'll be ready." Sunwoo nodded. They stood together and watched the ships disappear into the dark. Humanity had always believed that compassion was their greatest strength. The galaxy had mistaken it for their greatest weakness. They learned otherwise, and they only ever made that mistake once.